Welcome, everyone, to the Ascend Leadership Monthly webinar series, where we explore real life skills, everyday experiences that shape how we lead. This month, we're talking about all the nuances and complexities, the discomfort that comes with initiating, facilitating, and frankly, staying in difficult conversations. The question isn't if they're going to happen, the question is when, and they come in different sizes, the different flavors. High stakes to annoying, tense to emotional, hurtful, sometimes even scary. And I mean that like literally or psychologically scary. We see some coming and some catch us off guard, but it doesn't matter the circumstances because they always feel the same internally. That discomfort, whether that conversation kind of comes along slowly or erupts suddenly, it stirs something in us. In the professional context, particularly in a leadership role. And these moments can come up anywhere with anyone, peers, supervisors, direct reports, clients, team members, outside stakeholders, anytime, over lunch, in a meeting. Maybe you're testifying before a regulatory body or agency. The dynamics vary, but the internal experience tends to be the same. And to lead effectively, we have to be ready. Not perfect words necessarily, but ready with presence. And so that's today's session. It's how we show up and prepare ourselves internally. I will be trying to keep my eye on the Q&A. I've got it over here in the corner of my eye. So please, if you have thoughts, ideas as we move along, drop them in there. I'll try to share. I'll also try to answer questions as we go. So hi, I'm Jana ATN. I had a 26 plus year career in public accounting, and now I'm a consultant, speaker, and trainer. And my work is centered on something that I call fearless inclusion, which I define as the freedom to be yourself and the ability to create space for others to do the same. I develop trainings and workshops focused on that inner work of leadership, and that inner work includes how we navigate these moments that test us. Difficult conversations doesn't come down to only communication skills because they reveal our values, our priorities. They signal how we respect others. They challenge our ability to be present, our clarity. Part of being fearless is showing up fully even when the stakes feel high and the path is unclear. Because how we lead, especially when things are uncertain or emotionally charged, that all starts from within. And my passion in my work is helping business professionals build deep connections, cultivate safety, and thrive as inclusive, mindful, and trusted leaders. Now, I also want to say I had something going on with my throat earlier, so if my voice starts to get a little raspy and you have difficulty hearing me, let me know and I will try to project a little bit more. So the Ascend Monthly webinar series, I created this because I wanted to reframe how we think about leadership. Ascend isn't just a framework, it's a bit of a mindset, if you will, how we show up, which is what I've already been talking about. Most leadership programs focus on mastering individual skills and techniques. So things like tactics, frameworks, systems, those are all important. They are critical skills to have. Self-leadership is often a topic included in the curriculum. What I wanted to do with this model is integrate all of this together so that self-leadership is woven into all of that. That's because leadership isn't just about knowing how to do what we do. It's not just about having the right answers and knowing exactly the right technique. Yes, important. But what matters, I think sometimes more than the technique, especially in today's business environment, is how we're showing up as leaders. It's going to drive recruitment. It's going to drive retention. It's going to help us maintain client stickiness or serving the others in our organization. This matters when we have uncomfortable conversations, especially where they're unavoidable. As I said, they test your skills, your integrity, your emotional clarity. Even when we know what to do, when we've been taught the right way to handle it, it doesn't mean we can access what we know internally in that moment, because these moments are not about theory. Difficult conversations are about presence. Now, to put it differently, I just love my picture here of a bridge. I have this because when it comes to today's conversation, I'm going to guess many of you already know some of the fundamentals. Be respectful. Stay calm, listen actively, avoid assumptions, focus on the issue, not the person. On paper, this sounds great. It sounds simple, but even cliche that these techniques are all about how you show up, though. Mike Tyson said, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. Well, when it comes to difficult conversations, everyone has a plan until things get emotional. So the gap isn't about knowledge. Challenge being able to navigate a difficult conversation is about capacity. What I have here then on this bridge is what I think with Ascend is that we go from the skills and the strategies. We look at the things like authenticity, connection, empowerment, navigation, all of this. It's the metaphor where the skills bring us to the presence and how we show up and move, if you will, from mind, checklists, to heart, presence. Not every challenging conversation is the same. Some feel uncomfortable, some feel sensitive, some are truly difficult. And so they're all related, but I really wanted to group them into 4 categories to touch on some of these nuances. So unexpected situations are the moments that catch you off guard. You didn't plan to have this conversation, but something happened. Maybe it was a comment, maybe it was a reaction, maybe it was a change in temperature in the room, right? And suddenly you're in it. This can test your ability to stay present in the moment. This isn't as much about the topic as it is about your ability to manage reactivity in real time. I would call uncomfortable conversations. These are things that are closer to personal unease, if you will. So the topic might feel awkward. It could be a taboo topic, either for the organization or maybe in the culture that you grew up. We don't talk about that kind of thing, right? Or maybe we're just afraid it won't go well. So these kinds of conversations require a little bit of strategy, courage, maybe a bit of vulnerability on our part. I call a sensitive conversation as something that is more around someone's emotional state. Maybe it's their personal circumstances. These are the types of conversations that ask us to lead with empathy. They're not necessarily high conflict, but they carry emotional weight. So we have to tread carefully and with care, right? And then the last one is what I call difficult conversations. And these are the ones that maybe are higher stakes. They have different kinds of consequences. Maybe it's a business conflict that needs to be resolved. Maybe it's giving somebody some really unfortunate feedback. It could be letting somebody go, for example. These require clarity, emotional discipline, and the ability to hold tension without rushing through it. So I know the topic said difficult conversations, but it is there are literally different categories of those types of conversations. And so it's important to know because the tools, the strategies, the emotions, the types of things we're going to need to do to manage ourselves and our reactivity are going to shift subtly depending on the situation. What holds us back as humans will hold us back as leaders. That's not surprising. However, once you step into a leadership role, the cost of being stuck is higher. And this isn't just for us, but it's for the people we lead, for the teams we lead, for the organizations we lead. We can't lead another person or an organization through discomfort if we're not honest about what we're carrying into that conversation. So these internal narratives that you see here, these don't show up out of nowhere. They're shaped from our lifetimes of experience, the culture we were raised in, the roles we had in the past, the signals that we've received about what's acceptable. Maybe it's for our age, for our gender, for our title, for our visible, if you will, disability. It's complicated. There are a lot of layers here. And these narratives aren't flaws because we all carry them in some shape or form. They're really about how we make sense of the world. It's naming them that can help us become more self-aware and help us start to do that self-leadership, to lead ourselves first. So I just want to break these down pretty quickly. So emotional narratives are the hidden feelings that we often don't acknowledge, but they still shape how we show up. Stress, fear, anxiety, they quietly sit beneath the surface. Maybe you're feeling defensive and you don't realize it, or you're so focused so focused on keeping it together, right? Staying composed that you're basically shutting down and not really engaging in meaningful ways. You're not present. Maybe you're just phoning it in, if you will. Psychological narratives. These are those mental scripts that run in the background. Those are the ones that tell us how we should lead. Should. Dangerous word, because should always throws in there my judgments, my beliefs, my expectations. So we want to be very careful when we use the word should. And that really lives below the surface for a lot of psychological narratives. This could be where ego, self-doubt, internalized expectations creep in. There's a pressure to perform, or we have a voice that says, I need to handle this perfectly, or if I say the wrong thing, I'm going to lose credibility. Like, not literally those words, but that is what's flying under the radar, if you will, in our internal narrative, right? The narrative isn't necessarily loud, but it does distort how we interpret the situation. And then the relational narratives. These are the assumptions or beliefs that we carry about the other person that we are interacting with. Maybe you're assuming they'll get defensive. Maybe you think they won't take you seriously. Maybe you've had a past experience with this person, and it might be coloring your approach to this conversation. Maybe it's about power, where you feel, where do I stand? Do I have permission to speak? That kind of thing. So it's important to notice that these beliefs, these narratives, they will unconsciously shape your tone, your timing, and willingness to say what needs to be said. Now, I said we are only human because what holds us back will hold us back as leaders, what holds us back as humans, right? The difference is that our title can make that even feel harder. So I've listed 6 things here. I'm sure you could think of others. And if you do, drop them in the chat and open the chat window to make sure. Oh, Karen made a comment in here about, what's appropriate, what's the should for our height. So many barriers that we have around perception and what the archetype of correct looks like. That's part of what makes navigating these difficult conversations emotionally challenging. Now, so what's on this list that I have, though? Magnifying the emotional stakes. When you're in a position of authority, the cost of the mistake could be a breakdown in trust between you and that person. It could be you and that person and your leadership team. It could be the staff across the organization. I mean, that's the stakes, depending on what's going on, are really high and can affect you different ways emotionally. There's no safety net. That's the thing about leadership. The buck stops here. We may not get a second chance. And there's rarely a right way to say things. And so this fear can lead to a lot of second guessing, a lot of hesitation, which can come off as being aloof, dismissive, that you don't care, even though you care deeply. We've internalized those distorted messages about professionalism, and that's exactly what I was talking about with Karen's comment about height. We have a perception of what leadership looks like. So then what do? We sometimes edit ourselves, or we twist ourselves to fit that model. And then when something's uncomfortable, we find ourselves acting it out rather than showing up authentically. Niceness, this is where we want everyone to be comfortable. Kindness, this is where we tell the truth with care. And the problem is, if we confuse the two, we might soften or delay what needs to be said, which can get us right back to eroding trust. We weren't taught how to do this, right? Leadership training, as I mentioned earlier, often skips the emotional and relational complexities. That's what inspired Ascend. It's understanding how those emotionally charged moments influence our ability to do the things. And then the last one, the stakes are often invisible but real. We all know this, that sometimes what's making it difficult isn't technically the topic, but what it represents or what it touches. Identity, belonging, power, respect. When those things are in the room and we feel it, even if we can't name it, it changes the context and the emotional charge behind the conversation. And I love this quote: the problem with communication is the illusion that it has occurred. Don't mistake speaking for communication. Communication occurs when somebody understands you, not when you speak. Most of our communication is nonverbal. This is really important to remember when you're having difficult conversations. So, what are we talking about here? Body language, facial expression, tone of voice. They carry meaning, sometimes more meaning than the words that you were using. Studies show that people only remember anywhere from 7 to 14% of what we actually say. What they remember is how we made them feel. Remember, I keep coming back to that emotional inner feeling that we have to be able to manage in these difficult moments. So that's why difficult conversations require clear communication. It's what we say or don't say. It's how we say things and the expressions and the gestures, right? As the words are flowing out of our mouth. It's who we listen to. When we assume communication has happened, in fact, it has not, things are left unspoken, key thoughts are dropped off, trust will erode and that conversation will stall. So without trust, the conversation fails. What does this look like? Well, the first thing here I have is clear. This means saying what you mean without hiding behind jargon or cushioning your message so that you do it so much that the meaning kind of gets lost. It's unclear, right? Diplomatic. This is, what do I want to say? That's not what we're talking about. How can I say this in a way that is both true, but also caring, respectful, right? The next one is open. This is saying what needs to be said, not just what feels comfortable. So it's tempting to hold back, but when we do, we might confuse people because we're not giving them the whole truth, if you will, and that's creating ambiguity. Empathetic. This asks us to remember that communication isn't just about delivering the information, it's how that message lands. It means being thoughtful about what we might feel, what it might feel like to be on the receiving end of what we are saying. And then the last one is authentic. And authentic is important because people feel the difference between when someone is speaking with authority versus somebody is speaking from presence, from being there in the moment. I said this before, I'll say it again, that I think leadership is an outcome. I think there's a quote by Peter Drucker that leaders are people who have followers. Well, leadership is revealed in how people respond to us. True leadership isn't about the power we hold or the title. It's the impact we make. And that's why I describe clarity as a leadership skill, because it takes practice. It takes all of those things I just talked about. It's not necessarily having all the answers. It's about being honest, grounded, and intentional in how we communicate. When we get it right, clarity protects relationships. It reinforces trust. It prevents us from spiraling down through a series of misunderstandings, gives people something to hold on to when they feel uncertain. It reduces emotional ambiguity. It's the foundation of psychological safety. It's how we honor both care and truth. We say what needs to be said in a way people can hear. That is the heart of navigating a difficult conversation. When we can communicate clearly, it makes it easier for people to follow us, trust us, hear us, and respond to us. Now, we've already touched on a lot of these ideas, but I wanted to put this slide together to show them under a simple lens of what's happening within us versus what's contextual, right? What's happening around us. So those internal barriers are, wait for it, internal, right? These are the filters that are the meaning makers, if you will, of our interactions. They shape what we notice, the assumptions we make, how we react, and they aren't always conscious, but they're quietly driving us in the background. Even when nothing's being said, we might actually already be editing ourselves. Remember, I talked about twisting ourselves to fit some mold? That's what's happening within. On the other hand, what's happening in the environment or the context might be directly influencing how we're navigating this difficult moment, this conversation, this situation. It could be a past experience that is driving a response from me subconsciously, perhaps. Power dynamics, urgency. It could be a physical space, like a crowded room might activate certain emotions or anxieties within me that can make it difficult for me to stay present in a conversation. So just see the word anxiety. Anxiety is defined as the feeling of worry, nervousness, or unease about something uncertain or potentially negative. So it's a natural state, if you will, that alerts us to potential risk and prepares us to protect ourselves. And in the context of difficult conversations, anxiety often shows up before we've even said a word. Anxieties don't make us bad communicators or bad leaders. They make us human, right? But they do lead to behaviors, some of which I call non-conscious. Okay, non-conscious behaviors are the ones I would describe as the ones we know we do, but we're not necessarily paying attention or we notice when we're doing them. So, for example, my go-to reaction is defensiveness. I realize, I know I do it. So when I realize I'm doing it, I'm not surprised because it's one of my defense. It's one of my defense mechanisms. Defensiveness, defense mechanism. Right. Then there are other behaviors that I call the subconscious behaviors. These are the ones they are different than non-conscious because they're learned responses to situations. You know how to duck when a volleyball is about to hit you in the head? Well, we also learn to freeze when we feel threatened. When we are not aware of them, when they go unchecked, these anxieties, I mean, in general, they can activate a series of behavior dominoes, if you will, that can trip us up when things get uncomfortable. So we second guess ourselves. We hold back. We over explain. We shut down. We go to safe language. And so this directly impacts how we're being received, which directs or impacts whether we're feeling we're being trusted, which then impacts how well or effectively we can facilitate this difficult moment. Those are the dominoes, right? So I raised this here because this isn't about fixing all of our uncertainties or our anxieties. This is around building awareness so we can learn for ourselves what can get in the way. When we can pay attention to what's happening in the moment, then we can start to navigate that moment more safely. Now, we can't do a breakout group since this is not an in-person workshop or session. So instead, I want to offer a moment to pause and reflect. So I want you to think about a time when you said something or you did something and you had really good intentions, and then you were surprised by the other person's reaction. This doesn't have to be a difficult conversation. This is more about noticing the dynamic. So what are the questions here? What surprised you about their reaction? How did that reaction make you feel? How much did your good intentions matter, right? Give it a thought. And while you're thinking, I'm going to do a quick peek at the Q&A. Okay, I will come. Those are good questions, so I'll come back to that. Thank you. Well, the reason I wanted you to give this some thought is, ta-da, let's talk about that, right? The moment you were just thinking about, was it one of those moments where you might have said something like, well, that's not what I meant? In that moment, maybe we're confused because our intent was positive. We wanted to be helpful. It was well-meaning, but the other person experienced it completely differently. Maybe they felt dismissed, offended, excluded, unseen, powerless, right? Suddenly, the conversation went from talking about the subject that we are trying to work through to how somebody feels. That gap, that's called the intention impact gap. And in leadership, that gap will break the trust and make these moments really difficult. When people experience something negative, even if it wasn't intentional, they still carry that reaction, that doubt, that hesitation. Remember, we talk about how people remember how we make them feel. Here's the thing about intentions. They're based on what we hope to achieve. maybe a particular response, maybe we're trying to reach an agreement. They're shaped by how we assume others see us, which is shaped by our past experiences with them. And add to that the emotional state we are in. Are we stressed? Are we excited? Are we frustrated? Right? Add all of that stuff up, and you can start to see this mix can go sideways. And notice these are all we statements, they're I statements, my goals, my assumptions, my state of mind. Recipe for miscommunication. If we're not able to quiet that inner storm, right? So phases, that's not what I meant, or I am not sure how you got that from what I just said. Note, by the way, not helpful. Uh, or even saying something like, that's not what I said. Those are signals that our intention did not match the impact it had on the other person. But even if that is exactly what you said, and they actually did hear you wrong, how you respond, that will determine whether the conversation can stay on track. Because sometimes you can say that wasn't my intention and it lands well, and the person receives it with openness, the conversation continues without harm. But other times, that was not my intention can come across as defensive or dismissive. And it tells that other person, my motives matter than your experience. And so they may be interpreting your behavior through a number of different lenses. They're only processing a fraction of what you say. Remember, only some of what they hear is verbal. What they're hearing is our facial expressions, our tone, our body language, right? The rolling of the eyes, I don't know what they call this of the hand, but they might be hearing that. I saw a quote somewhere about, what was it? Something about it's making it hard to hear you because of how you're exposed. Never mind, I can't remember the quote. But anyway, they may be making assumptions about your motives because of how they perceive you, your reputation, for example, your role. There could be differences in personality. There could be differences of conflict management or approach style. And their emotional state matters too, right? Maybe they're stressed. Maybe they're tired. Maybe they're just hangry, right? Like, who knows? Because we've all been there. So many opportunities for messages to be received differently than what we intend, in good ways and in bad ways. So that's why when we, instead of saying, that wasn't my intention, we start by trying to understand how something landed on the other person and meet them there. It shows emotional maturity. It builds trust. It shows that we didn't mean to cause harm or hurt, and we care enough to repair it. So when you're in doubt, when you're struggling, focus less on proving your intention and start trying to understand your impact. Let's meet them where they are, get an understanding of how they heard that or what it is they're looking for, and we can continue the conversation there. So this saying, it doesn't matter what I said, what matters is what you heard, is a family motto, right? It evolved because when our boys were young, I would literally watch them argue. Sebastian would say something to Dominic, and Dominic would say something back. And then Sebastian would say, that is not what I said. And Dominic would say, Sebastian would say something, Dominic would say, that's not what I said. And that's important because I know those two personalities. And Sebastian would say, no, it's what I said. I'm standing right there and I can tell you that's exactly what he said, right? It all doesn't matter. It's exactly what I was just saying. The only way to move forward for my boys to get past that moment is for Sebastian to circle back and think, well, what did I say? Maybe start to think, well, what did I mean, right? And Dominic needs to step back and think, well, what did I hear? Now, I'm putting this on two little kids, but I will tell you that when they were willing to slow down, listen to each other, understand not just what was said, but what was intended and how that may or may not have been received. That's what this phrase did. It started out as a phrase to, control, alt, delete a situation, but it eventually became a family rule because it was a simple reminder that communication is about proving you said something right. It's about reaching a shared understanding. Now, I want to invite you to do the flip now of a different reflection. So thinking about a time when you were surprised by something someone said or did. So thinking about, well, what was their intention? Did it matter to you that they had good intentions? How did they react to your reaction, right? That's always an interesting one. How did your reaction affect them and the way they started to behave? After a difficult conversation or uncomfortable moment has passed, a reflection like this can actually help you build some self awareness so that you can start to understand when this intention impact gap happens, whether it's something you did or something that you experienced, maybe by us or to us, I guess is a way to say that. If we can catch it in real time, we can start to learn how to close that gap so that we can sort of that control alt delete, if you will, and not get stuck. Now, this infographic, I want to say, I shared this in February in the emotional intelligence session. And I shared this because I said earlier, conflict is inevitable. But what triggers it is often a physiological response, that racing heartbeat, that tension, the defensiveness. There's a tendency to want to rush in and fix a problem, but in a difficult situation that might escalate things if somebody feels unheard. Maybe they feel invisible. Earlier, I used the word powerless. So what I'm hoping this graphic illustrates is that there's an interconnectedness and a fluidity with all of the things that I've been talking about. Maintaining composure is at the intersection of, right, regulating our reactions, focusing on understanding, and seeking a solution. It isn't a one-time thing. It isn't a conflict management strategy per se. It's an ongoing process, and it requires emotional awareness, like what's about our tone, our body, our energy, pausing. It might simply be unclenching the jaw, inviting us to be curious and listen openly. Create a space where we can try to find a shared agreement, not just the win. So how do we bridge this gap, right? All of those are wonderful things, but how do we actually do it? If you're navigating or facilitating a difficult situation or conversation, it's dependent on how we show up. This I've made clear. It requires us to engage with a heightened awareness and sensitivity, with authenticity, and with vulnerability. So the art of communication starts with intention. 1, identifying your intention. 2, expressing yourself in a way that conveys your intention. And then 3, confirming that what was received by the other person was what you were intending to convey. Those are 3 distinctly different things. And those things together are the foundation of conscious communication. So this is engaging with awareness, emotional intelligence, recognizing our impact on others, understanding the connection between our internal state and how we express ourselves, mindful of our environment, and responding thoughtfully, not impulsively. So everything I talked about, the emotional weight of difficult conversations, the disconnect, intention, impact gap. It's not what we do, it's how we show up. Well, that's what inspired me to develop the REM 360 framework. It's to help leaders stay grounded in emotionally complex situations, especially when there's tension in the room, uncertainty, there's a risk or frailty to the trust, something high stakes or important is on the line. So it applies to all kinds of moments where discomfort, stress, and emotional undercurrents can interrupt what we're trying to achieve. So REM 360 is the how to practice conscious communications. It's noticing when something is shifting internally and then being able to respond in a way that reflects your values, how you want to show up, and is appropriate for the moment that you're in. It's not a checklist. It's not a script. It's not a replacement for whatever tools you're already working with that are working for you. It's really about a mindset shift and a way to stay present, to be comfortably uncomfortable, right? And it includes 3 elements: noticing what's happening in real time, staying grounded in your values throughout the discussion or interaction, and then repairing and resetting afterwards. When we are in the middle of a difficult conversation, it is easy to focus only on the outcome. But we have to pay attention as leaders to how people are experiencing the entire process. So this is a framework to help you navigate those moments. So let's walk through each of these 3 things. First, Real-time awareness, which I define as the ability to notice your reactions, internal and external, so you can avoid being reactive and instead create space. Key word there, creating space. So creates an opportunity to be deliberate, thoughtful, and intentional. Now, one of my personal sayings, if you've attended some of my sessions, you've heard me say this before: start with notice. And I say that because you can't change something if you don't know it's happening, right? Managing reactivity requires us to notice that we're being reactive. Regulating our emotional expression requires us to notice when we're being, I'll say, quote unquote, emotional. It's difficult to be intentional when our brains are shifting into autopilot because we're activated by something that's happening in the room. So the lack of real-time awareness can actually contribute to or compound that intention impact gap. So I once got some difficult feedback. It was a 360 review, and the feedback said that I was critical, and not in the good, sharp, analytical mind kind of way, but in the I sometimes hurt people's feelings kind of way. I cannot tell you how upset that made me. I know I can be matter of fact and direct, but I never intended to be dismissive or insensitive. I was completely unaware of the gap between my intention and my impact. So start with notice. That was the advice that came from my coach. It was the beginning of a long, hard journey, and it actually was part of the development of REM 360. Now, why does this matter, right? Without real-time awareness, we risk letting reactivity take the lead. It's driving the bus, driving the train, driving the bus. When that happens, our best intentions can get lost. So you mean to be helpful or supportive, but if your tone is sharp, your posture is closed, your words are sort of rushed, that intention may not land, right? It might not land anywhere near what you were hoping for. Or in my case, I was too brief, I was too direct, and it felt dismissive. So when this happens, we miss the moment because we don't notice that something is shifting, and our body language might be signaling that we're activated to others, which then creates this domino effect, if you will. When we're disconnected from our own reactions, we may unintentionally make the situation worse. We talk over somebody. We withdraw and we don't even realize we're doing it. Remember, I said earlier, we're so conscious of saying the right thing that we're not paying attention to what needs to be said. That kind of disconnection could affect more than the outcome of the conversation. It could affect your relationship. What real-time awareness does, this is why it's so important. If you hear nothing else today, this is the goal. Real-time awareness, because what it does is it roots us in the present. It connects us to our bodies and our feelings. It interrupts that autopilot and that non-conscious behavior. And when we can do that, it gives us an opportunity to choose our intention. And I say opportunity because it doesn't guarantee I'll actually be able to move forward and express my intention, but it gives us a chance to do that. This isn't self-awareness for, self-awareness sake. It's the foundation of leading with empathy, clarity, and the presence that is needed from us as leaders in those moments that matter so much. And I'll tell you, for me, that whole thing about me being critical, real-time awareness was the start of my journey. My goal to simply start noticing when I was being critical, it took a minute, right? At first, I didn't notice it for a few weeks. Then I would realize I'd done it a day ago. I'd realize I'd done it a couple hours ago. And the magic moment happened when I was about to do it. And I noticed that noticing created just enough space for me to be intentional about what came out of my mouth next. All that thought, though, how do you do this? How do you develop real-time awareness? Well, one strategy might be to develop that mind-body connection. This scan is something that you can try. It's pretty quick and you can do it anytime. Step one, what am I thinking about right now? 90%, more than 90% of what we do is automatic. So what this does is it interrupts autopilot, and just asking this question can bring you right back to the present. Wherever your brain was, you're back here right now. Number two, what emotions am I feeling? They're often hard to name, like you just feel off or I'm uncomfortable. But if you can name it, stress, guilt, frustration, right? That gives you something to work with. How are my emotions impacting my physical being? Because there's usually a link. For me, that defensiveness that I talk about is a very distinct feeling in my back. And I've learned to trust that. When I feel that, I'm being defensive. And then four, how is all of this affecting my behavior? Maybe you realize you're pivoting in your seat, you're sitting a certain way, your breathing has changed. What this helps you do is reconnect to yourself so you can minimize, possibly stop reactivity. Okay, so the next one is emotional anchoring. This is the ability to stay composed despite the distress and the discomfort. This is how you become or learn to be comfortably uncomfortable. So let's say I notice I'm being reactive, right? Well, when I finally started noticing those moments that, oh, I'm about to do it, I'm about to say it, I will tell you that's where things got awkward. That's where emotional anchoring was so important because I had tried and tried to notice that I was about to criticize, and then I found it, I noticed it, and then surprise, I wasn't ready for the moment. It was emotional. It was uncomfortable. I was in unfamiliar territory without a plan. So, navigating my way out of those feelings so that I could say what I wanted to say in a way that aligned with my intention. I wanted to be useful. I wanted to be constructive. I wanted to offer a new idea, perhaps. It took time and it took effort. I had to quiet those inner noises I was talking about. That feeling of I felt conspicuous, like everybody knew it, what was happening. There was a voice inside my head that made me feel stupid for not knowing, right? This defensiveness started to quietly seep in, even though nobody could see anything was happening. So developing the ability to sit in that discomfort and continue to engage, that's what I mean by emotional anchoring. Now, why does it matter? Because if we don't do this, we're likely to respond by habit, to deflect, to shut down, to push, just push through and not truly show up in that moment. It helps us regulate that intensity so that we can identify the emotion that is right for the situation, and then we can express our emotions that way. It creates that space for connection. When I'm grounded, when you're sitting quietly in that space, you can help others feel safe because you're signaling to people, I know this is hard, but I'm here. I'm here. I'm listening. I can handle this, and so can you. You're not literally saying that. You're signaling this. Or maybe you're actually saying that if the moment calls for that. It models that emotional steadiness because when you're a leader, people are watching how you do. Are you living the talk? And when you show them how to anchor themselves, show them steadiness, help them to feel safe doing it, they will model you and they are starting to learn through you how to lead with care, lead with calm, and lead with clarity. So, how do you do it? Well, a couple of things you can try. Two things that I've heard a lot of people doing more and more: centering and grounding. Now, they're often used interchangeably, but I look at centering as reconnecting with your values. So, what does it mean to get centered? It means to sort of step back, remind yourself of your values, your purpose, your intention, your goal here, reconnecting to that to get some clarity so that you can move forward from that space in this conversation. Grounded is a different strategy, and this is really about reconnecting to where you are right now in the physical world in this present moment. And so there are a lot of different grounding techniques, but the idea here is you want to stabilize yourself either through emotional and mental equilibrium, if you will, the values, or your physical environment to get present and snap back into where you are. And then the last one is mindful recovery. And mindful recovery is the moment has passed, the meeting has ended, the conversation is over, but feelings of embarrassment could linger. When I was working on noticing, by the way, for example, I would feel retroactively embarrassed. And the next time I saw the person, when I knew I had done it to them yesterday, that embarrassment would tap me on the shoulder. So mindful recovery is giving ourselves the grace and the permission to not be okay or to be not okay, right? Allowing yourself to feel the feelings without being ashamed or feeling weak or feeling silly, reflecting on what happened so we can learn from it, That's how we build resilience, right? You know that saying, when you know better, you do better? I like to say it a little differently. When you know better, you try to shift 1 degree in that direction so you have a chance at doing better the next time. Doesn't quite roll off the tongue, but those 1 degree shifts are no small thing. Change is the sum of a million little teeny weeny things you do over time. And 1 degree is doable, it's attainable, it's realistic. And if you just keep doing it over time, you'll get there. I don't know that I even need to cover the why it matters, because I've kind of already covered it, but I will say this. Your nervous system does not know the conversation is over. You might still be replaying what was said in your mind. Your body might still be holding tension. What about a headache starting to form, or all of a sudden you feel tired? I mean, has that happened to you? I know this has happened to me. And without recovery, that stress, those feelings, that headache, that fatigue, you're taking them right into the next meeting, into the next moment. So what mindful recovery does, even if it's just a minute, right? It helps us restore clarity, restore presence, gets us to come back to ourselves. It also helps us from building up some emotional residue, right? That accumulates over time to the point where it's influencing directly our tone, our relationships, and our capacity. Remember, this isn't about recovery. This is about presence. So how do you do it? Well, this one, I have no right answers for you. There are a lot of things you can do. I threw a couple of ideas here just to give you a sense of what I'm talking about. Resetting the body, go for a walk. Do a 5-minute full body stretch. There are apps for that. You can find videos on YouTube to walk you through that. You can try a short grounding exercise. Videos on YouTube for that, apps that you can use for that. I think Calm has an app that does that. I use Insight Timer now. I've never looked to see if it has that. But releasing emotion, what is that? Maybe you could journal. And if writing isn't your thing, I know it doesn't work for me, a voice memo on your phone. You just want to get it out, right? Let yourself cry. Take 3 deep, intentional breaths to sort of slow you down. Restore clarity. This could be journaling. This could be a meditation. It could be a walk. It could simply be setting a very clear intention as you walk into the next meeting. And then the last one, calming your nervous system. It could be all of the things I described. Or what about turn down the lights and just listen to some music? At the end of the day, our goal here is to build that emotional muscle that gives us the ability to be comfortably uncomfortable. In order to move through difficult conversations, that's the ultimate skill we need. It takes time, it takes practice. And as REM 360 illustrates, this process isn't linear and it isn't necessarily circular. These 3 elements are interconnected and form the foundation of a holistic practice. Start with notice, pause before reacting so you can anchor yourself in your intention, create space to recover with grace, not guilt. It's a repeatable process. Each element is a combination of those little teeny small intentional behaviors that over time strengthen that emotional muscle. And then you keep practicing, even if it's 1 degree at a time. Because the goal isn't perfection, it's presence. Now, before I go, I just want to make sure you know there's another handout here. Jason, please tell me I uploaded this. I hope I did. If not, I don't know how we'll get it to everybody, but actually I can tell you it'll be available on my website for download if for some reason I didn't upload it. But I created this intention setting worksheet as a tool to guide you through preparing for an upcoming high stakes or emotionally charged conversation. Clarify your goals, get grounded emotionally, and then there's another section where you can reflect afterwards. This will help us develop self-awareness and our leadership presence over time. Okay, so I didn't see a lot of questions coming in, but I have 3 or 4 minutes left. So this one question I thought was interesting. Excuse me. Sorry. Apparently I can't swallow. I am so sorry. So, this question came in, which I think is interesting, about filling out a survey. Interesting. They had an experience, they were exhausted, and they made a comment. It was truthful, but not something they normally would have said. They apologized to the company they were offering the feedback to, but that other company twisted the apology, and then they felt like they got in trouble for making the apology. So now they're concerned that no matter what they do, it'll be twisted. Um, I was recommended I just give everyone an excellent score, but that is not authentic. How do you attend the future one without being petrified? How do you fill out a form that is not truthful just to not get in trouble? Oh, challenges of not being anonymous. I honor that and I see you. First of all, I think there's something I call the simple truth. And the simple truth is simply saying what it is you're trying to say. Example: somebody's is asking you a question, you're not really sure what to say, you're a little bit conflicted, or you need a little bit of time to work it out. Here's what you can say, and I'm not trying to be sarcastic. You can say, I'm not really sure how to answer that. Well, the same is true here. You can say, this was a great course I was challenged by. The thing is, we don't want to use negative language. We want to use constructive language. And we can't control how somebody is going to take what we say. So you want to make sure that when you look at how you're writing it, what you're writing is an expression of your intention in a way that is clear, straightforward, open, authentic, right? It's all of those things on the Art of Communication slide. Not easy, but I encourage you to continue to give feedback that way. I know as a speaker, I don't want people to give me 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. That's not helpful. And I don't want people to give me 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. That's not helpful. What's helpful is the range so that I can get a sense of how I'm doing. So I wish you luck, and I thank you for bringing up that question. I got to read this one. Hang on. Oh, wow. This is a really great story to share. So thank you. I'll just read it aloud, word for word. I had breast cancer surgery yesterday. Really? I gave my doctor a headspace quote as a compliment. Communication can be confusing. Good communication builds clarity. He is the best ever. Everyone should win the lottery with a great surgeon who can communicate all facts, even scary ones. Communicate all facts, even scary ones. That's what we need to be able to do as leaders, even when we're, or maybe I should say, especially when we're uncomfortable. Well, before we go, I want to invite you to continue the journey with me. Next month's session is a perfect segue from this one. We're talking about mindful leadership practices. So, what is the link between mindfulness and decision making? Between mindfulness and trust? What are the benefits of mindfulness when it comes to building resilience and self-awareness? So, continue the journey with me. Fourth Friday of every month from 3 to 4 Eastern. Registration for this session is now open. And then looking further ahead in July, empowering your teams. In August, communicating with clarity and impact. You can see the full schedule on my website. You can sign up for a notification from when registration opens. And as I mentioned earlier, you can download the handout if I forgot to put it here. And if I did, I apologize. I really do. If you're interested in learning more about how there are other programs that I offer, you scan the QR code to get some time on my calendar, send me an email, message me on LinkedIn. Thank you again for being here, and I hope to see you next time.